Lost in the ice storm, the sky above planet Kareth was gray and full of sharp winds. The ice storm had started 2 days ago and had not stopped. Cold air moved fast across the frozen land. Nothing moved. No birds. No animals. No ships. Only the wind screamed like a wild ghost. And in the middle of all this, a small alien child stood alone. His name was Cal. He was only 6 years old. His skin was soft and blue. His eyes glowed with gentle light. His feet were bare, turning purple from the cold. Snow covered his hair. His thin shirt was torn, and his small hands held nothing but ice. He looked around again and again, but no one was there. Cal's tears froze on his cheeks. They turned to small drops of ice. He had not eaten in 2 days. His lips were dry. His legs were weak. But he could not sit down. He was afraid that if he sat, he might never get up again. He had been lost since the night the pirates attacked. They came fast, shooting at everything. His mother grabbed his hand and ran. But in the chaos, he fell. By the time he stood back up, she was gone. Now Cal walked slowly, one step at a time, trying to follow tracks in the snow. But the storm had erased everything. His tiny body shook. His voice was too weak to call for help. No one would hear him anyway. Just when Cal thought he could not take another step, he saw something strange in the distance. A tall shape moved through the white snow. At first, he thought it was a shadow. Then it came closer. It was not an animal. It was not a monster. It was a person. And not just any person, a human. Cal's eyes opened wide. He had heard about humans. The elders always spoke of them in whispers. Dangerous, they said. Violent. But this one was different. He walked slowly, arms out, wearing thick black clothes. His face was rough and had a short beard. His eyes were sharp but calm. He stopped in front of Cal, looking down. The man said nothing at first. Then he took off his coat. It was big and warm. He wrapped it around Cal carefully. Cal wanted to run, but he was too cold and too tired. The man knelt beside him and spoke gently. You're not safe here. Come with me. Cal did not answer, but he nodded slowly. The human picked him up in strong arms. Cal felt warm for the first time in days. He rested his head on the man's shoulder. His eyes closed. He didn't care where they were going. He just wanted to sleep. The human carried him through the storm. It took over an hour to reach a small cave in the side of a hill. The wind howled outside, but inside, it was quiet. The man laid Cal on a dry surface and placed the coat tightly around him. Then he took out a small tool from his bag and started a fire. Cal watched the fire grow. He had never seen one before. The light danced on the walls. The heat touched his face and made him feel safe. After a while, the human gave him a small food bar and some water. Cal ate slowly. He wanted to speak, but he was too scared. The man looked at him kindly. What's your name? The human asked. Cal, the boy whispered. I'm Thomas, the man said with a small smile. For a long time, they just sat in silence. Cal looked at the fire. Thomas looked at Cal. Finally, Cal spoke again. I lost my mother. Thomas nodded. We'll find her. Cal looked up at him. Why are you helping me? I'm not human. Thomas paused for a moment. Then he said, because no child should be left alone in the cold. Cal didn't know what to say. No one had ever told him that before. He thought humans only helped their own kind. But this man, Thomas, was different. He had come through the ice, found him, and given him warmth. In a world that had shown Cal only fear, this was something new. Outside, the storm raged on. But inside the cave, the fire burned strong. Cal pulled the coat tighter and looked at Thomas. He didn't know if they would ever find his mother. He didn't even know if they would survive the next day. But for now, he was not alone, and that made all the difference. Asterisk a warm fire. A cold truth. Cal woke to the sound of wood crackling. The fire was still burning. Warmth filled the small cave. For a moment, he forgot the cold, the fear, and the loneliness. Then it all came back. He sat up quickly, eyes wide, heart beating fast. But Thomas was still there, sitting quietly across the fire, watching him with calm eyes. He gave a small nod. You're safe now. Cal pulled the coat tighter around himself. He looked around. The storm still howled outside, but the wind couldn't reach him here. He had not felt safe in a long time. But even now, fear stayed inside him. He didn't know who this human really was. Thomas placed a small packet of food near the fire and warmed it. After a few minutes, he opened it and passed it to Cal. It's not much, he said, but it will help. Cal took it slowly and began to eat. It was warm and soft. He didn't care what it was. His belly had been empty for too long. After some time, Thomas spoke again. You told me your name is Cal. Do you remember what ship you came from? Cal nodded slowly. Transport 5, from Zolari Refuge. Thomas's eyes darkened. That ship was attacked. Cal looked down. I was with my mother. We were running when loud sounds came. She held my hand. Then she was gone. Thomas said nothing for a moment. He stared at the fire like it held answers. Then he spoke quietly. I saw that ship burning 2 nights ago. I was close. Cal's voice broke. Did you see her? I didn't see her, Thomas said honestly. But I saw escape pods. Some made it out. That gave Cal a little hope. Do you think she's alive? Thomas looked him in the eyes. I don't know, but I will help you find her. Cal stared at him. Why? Thomas didn't answer right away. He looked at the fire. Again, then spoke in a low voice. Because I had a son once. He was about your age. I lost him. I couldn't save him. But maybe I can save you. Silence filled the cave. Cal didn't know what to say. He just looked at Thomas, and for the first time, he saw not just a strong human, but someone who had pain too. Not all humans were monsters. Not all were cruel. Thomas stood and walked to a bag in the corner. He pulled out a small device and placed it on the ground. It was broken and covered in snow, but he began to fix it. His fingers moved quickly, like he had done this many times before. Cal watched. What is that? A signal booster, Thomas said. If I fix it, we can send a message. Maybe someone will hear us. Cal's heart jumped. To my mother? To anyone listening, Thomas replied. But if your mother made it, she'll hear your name. Cal moved closer. Can I help? Thomas looked at him, surprised, then smiled. Yeah, hold this wire. Together, they worked. Cal didn't understand most of it, but he followed Thomas's words. It felt good to do something, to not feel helpless. Time passed slowly. The wind screamed outside, but the fire stayed strong inside. And in the small glow of that cave, hope began to return. Later, as night fell again, Cal sat beside Thomas near the fire. He leaned against his side and asked softly, Are humans always like you? Thomas looked down. No, many are not. Some fear what they don't understand. Some only fight, but some just want peace. Cal closed his eyes. I think you're one of the good ones. Thomas placed a hand on Cal's shoulder. I'm trying to be. Outside, the ice storm had not stopped. But inside the cave, something was changing. A bond had started to grow between a human and a lost alien child, 2 strangers who now shared one goal, find the mother, and survive, even if the galaxy was cold. The fire between them was not. Asterisk human versus the hunter's. Cal woke to the sound of footsteps. They were not soft like Thomas's. They were heavy, fast, angry. Cal sat up, heart racing. Thomas was already standing near the cave entrance, one hand gripping a long metal rod. His eyes were sharp. He didn't speak, but his whole body was alert. What is it? Cal whispered, scared. Thomas didn't turn. Someone's coming, and they're not here to help. The boy's breath caught in his throat. He crawled backward, deeper into the cave. Outside, shapes moved in the snow. 4 figures, tall, wrapped in dark armor with glowing red lights. Alien hunters. Cal knew their kind. They didn't care about lost children. They didn't search to rescue. They captured. They sold. They hurt. Cal started to cry again, shaking. Thomas reached into his bag and pulled out something small, an old shock device. Barely working, but better than nothing. He looked back once and said quietly, Stay behind me. No matter what. The hunters came closer. They stopped just outside the cave, scanning with sharp, beeping tools. One of them shouted something in another language. Then they entered. Thomas didn't wait. He moved like a shadow, fast and powerful. The first hunter raised his weapon, but Thomas knocked it from his hands and hit him hard in the chest. The alien fell back, gasping. The others rushed forward. Cal screamed, but Thomas didn't stop. He ducked under one, kicked another in the legs, and twisted the last one's arm. The cave was full of noise now, grunts, shouts, and metal hitting. Stone. The fight was not clean. It was wild. Snow flew. Sparks flew. One hunter pulled a knife and slashed Thomas's side. Blood ran, but Thomas didn't fall. He growled and punched the alien straight in the face. The alien dropped like a stone. Cal watched with wide eyes. He had never seen anyone fight like that. Not even the soldiers from his planet. This human was like a storm. Finally, the last hunter tried to run. Thomas picked up the dropped shock device and threw it. It hit the alien's back. Electricity cracked. The alien dropped into the snow, twitching. Silence. Thomas stood still, chest rising and falling. Blood dripped from his side, but he didn't show pain. Cal ran to him. "You're hurt." Thomas knelt and checked the wound. "Just a cut. I'll live." "Why did they come?" Cal asked. "They're slave trackers," Thomas said. "They look for lost ones like you. They sell them. They would have taken you far from here." Cal felt sick. "And you fought them for me?" Thomas nodded. "I told you. I'm not leaving you." Cal sat down next to him, shaking. The fear was still inside him, but something else grew stronger now. Trust. Real trust. Not just safety from the cold, but from the world. Thomas pulled out a small cloth and pressed it against his wound. Cal helped. "You're really brave," Cal whispered. Thomas smiled faintly. "I've just seen too much to let this happen again." He checked the bodies of the hunters. One of them carried a working scanner. Thomas grabbed it and powered it on. It beeped and flashed. A signal pulsed on the screen. "They were tracking someone else too," he said. Cal looked up. "My mother?" "Maybe," Thomas said. "If we follow this signal, it might lead us to her. Or to the people who took her." Cal stood, his hands clenched. "I want to go." Thomas looked at him carefully. "It'll be dangerous." "I don't care," Cal said. "If there's even a small chance. I want to try." Thomas nodded slowly. "Then we move at first light." That night, as the storm began to slow, Cal sat near the fire and stared at the sleeping hunters on the ground. For the first time in his life, someone had fought for him. Not because of duty, not for reward, just because it was right, and that someone was a human. The signal of hope. The snowstorm had passed, leaving a quiet white world behind. The sky was pale, the wind soft now. But inside the cave, something more important had changed. Cal was no longer just a lost child. He was a boy with a mission, and he wasn't alone. Thomas stood outside the cave, holding the stolen scanner from the hunters. He wiped the screen clean with his sleeve and turned it on again. A small green light blinked in one corner. The signal was still there, weak but alive. Somewhere across the frozen land, someone was broadcasting a distress call. Cal stepped up beside him. "Is it her?" Thomas didn't answer right away. He studied the signal. "It's from someone using a refugee ID code. That could be your mother." "It's a strong chance." Cal's heart beat faster. "Then we have to go." "We will," Thomas said. "But first, we prepare." He went back into the cave and packed what they had. Food, water, a few tools. Cal helped, carefully folding the coat Thomas had given him. The fire was now just glowing embers, and the hunters were gone, left behind in the snow after Thomas dragged them far away. Thomas wrapped his side with fresh bandages. The wound still hurt, but he didn't show it. Cal saw the way he moved. Slower now, but he said nothing. He just watched, learning what strength really looked like. Before they left, Cal stared at the cave one last time. It had become something special, a place where fear had changed into hope. But now they had to leave. They had a direction. They had a signal. They had each other. They walked for hours through the snow. The path was not easy. Ice cracked under their boots. Strange shadows moved across the hills. Cal stayed close, clutching the scanner tightly. Every time it blinked, he felt his heart rise. "I used to think humans were only stories," Cal said softly. "What kind of stories?" Thomas asked. "Bad ones," Cal replied. "The ones that made kids like me stay inside at night." Thomas chuckled. "Sounds like we've got a reputation." Cal looked up at him. "But you're not like that." Thomas gave a small smile. "Maybe the stories are wrong. Or maybe I'm just different." As the sun began to set, they reached a small ridge. From the top, they saw a distant shape, half covered in snow, metal shining faintly. A crash shuttle. The signal was coming. From inside, Cal ran ahead, but Thomas stopped him. "Wait." He scanned the area with his eyes. "No footprints. No movement. But stay behind me, just in case." They moved carefully down the slope. The wind was colder here, sharper. The ship had been there for days, maybe more. Thomas forced. "Open the side hatch." Inside, it was dark, broken, and silent. Cal stepped in slowly. "Is she here?" Thomas checked the scanner. "The signal's close. Might be in the back." They walked through the wreck. Broken seats, smashed controls, cracked windows. Then, a voice. "Help." It was weak. Almost a whisper. Cal's eyes widened. "Mother." He ran toward the sound, tears already in his eyes. In a corner, behind a half-fallen wall, lay a woman with the same glowing eyes and soft blue skin. She was thin, her face pale, but she was alive. Cal, she gasped. Cal fell into her arms. I found you. I found you. Thomas stepped back, letting them have the moment. He watched quietly, his eyes filled with something deep, something like peace. The mother held her son tightly. I thought you were gone. I had help, Cal said, looking back at Thomas. He saved me. She looked up at the human, confused. You helped my child? Thomas nodded. He helped me too. She tried to stand, but her legs were too weak. Thomas moved forward and lifted her gently. We need to get you out of here. This ship isn't safe. Cal held his mother's hand as they left the wreck. The snow was falling again, soft and quiet this time. The sky above was turning blue with stars. For the first time in days, Cal smiled without fear. His mother was alive. The signal had worked. And the man who was once just a stranger now felt like family. But as they walked back to the ridge, Thomas looked at the horizon with concern. This isn't over, he said. Cal looked up. What do you mean? That signal. Others might have heard it too. And deep in the distance, something moved. Asterisk trapped in the alien camp, they walked through the snow with hope in their hearts. But danger was already waiting ahead. Cal held his mother's hand tightly. Her steps were slow, and her body was weak. Thomas carried most of the weight, letting her rest on his shoulder. The wind blew around them, but none of them cared anymore. They were together now. That was all that mattered, until the sky turned red and a loud humming sound broke the quiet. It was deep and sharp, coming from above. Thomas looked up first and froze. Cal followed his eyes and gasped. A large alien aircraft was flying low, circling them like a vulture. Its lights blinked with warning. Thomas grabbed them both and ran toward a patch of rocks. But it was too late that a bright beam of energy shot down from the ship. The snow around them exploded in light. Cal couldn't see anything. Then everything went black. He woke inside a cold metal room. His mother was lying beside him, her arms around him. Thomas was gone. The door opened, and two large aliens entered. Their skin was dark green, their armor thick, and their faces hidden behind masks. One of them spoke in a deep voice, the child and the female. Keep them locked. The human will be dealt with. Cal tried to speak, but his voice shook. Where is he? Where's Thomas? The guard didn't answer. The door slammed shut again. Cal hugged his mother, trying not to cry. She was still weak, barely able to sit up. I'm sorry, she whispered. I should have protected you. No, Cal said. It's not your fault. We were almost safe. Thomas, he was going to take us somewhere better. In the next room, Thomas sat tied to a metal post, his face bruised. A guard stood over him. Why would a human protect alien refugees? The guard sneered. Thomas looked up with tired eyes. Because someone has to. The guard slapped him hard. You think you're a hero? Thomas didn't answer. His thoughts were not on himself. They were on Cal and his mother. He had promised to protect them. He had promised to bring them to safety. He would not break that promise. Back in the prison room, Cal stared at the locked door. He looked around and saw a small vent near the ceiling. I can fit through that, he said quietly. No, his mother whispered. It's too dangerous. I have to find Thomas, Cal said. He needs us now. She touched his cheek. You've become so brave. Cal nodded. Because of him. With her help, he climbed up onto a broken bench, pulled himself through the vent, and crawled forward. The tunnel was small and dark, but he kept going. He didn't stop. He didn't look back. Finally, he reached another room and looked through the vent grate. Below, he saw Thomas tied up. Blood ran down his arm. A guard stood nearby, but he was facing the other way. Cal pushed the grate slowly. It made a soft sound, but the guard didn't hear. Cal dropped down quietly, picked up a small pipe from the floor, and moved behind the guard. His hands shook. He didn't want to hurt anyone, but he had no choice. He hit the guard on the head. The alien stumbled forward, then fell to the ground. Cal? Thomas whispered. I'm here, Cal said as he cut the rope with the guards. Unweaponed, Thomas stood slowly. He looked at the boy, then smiled through the pain. You saved me. Cal helped him walk. Now let's save her too. They moved fast, hiding in shadows, staying low. They reached the prison room. Thomas kicked the door open and picked up Cal's mother gently. Guards started shouting behind them. Alarms rang out. But Thomas didn't stop. He ran, carrying her, with Cal by his side. They reached the landing bay, where a small scout ship sat alone. Thomas had seen this kind of ship before. He knew how to fly it. They rushed in, locked the doors, and powered the engine. Shots hit the outside. Red lights flashed. But then, the ship lifted off. They were free. Cal held his mother close. She cried softly into his shoulder. Thomas looked back at them from the pilot's seat. "We're not safe yet," he said. "But we're not prisoners anymore." And outside, the stars began to appear once again. The long walk back the stolen scout ship flew low across the frozen sky. Wind pressed against the glass, and old metal creaked with every gust. Thomas held the controls tight, his eyes scanning the endless white land below. There was no map, no clear path, just snow, ice, and hope. In the back, Cal sat beside his mother. She rested her head on his shoulder, her breath slow and shallow. Her skin was still too pale. She had lost too much blood and strength in the alien camp. Cal didn't want to say it, but he knew she wouldn't survive another prison. "We need to land," Thomas said. "This ship won't stay in the air for long." Cal looked up. "But where?" "There's nothing out there." Thomas pointed to the scanner. A faint energy reading blinked in the corner. "There's a human outpost, abandoned long ago. If it still stands, we can shelter there." The ship groaned as it dropped lower. Soon, it touched down roughly on a snow-covered flat. The engine gave a final cough, then died. Smoke drifted into the cold air. Thomas opened the hatch. The wind hit hard. He grabbed his bag, lifted Cal's mother into his arms, and started walking. Cal followed close behind. The snow was deeper here. Every step was slow. The wind tried to push them back. Thomas's breath came in sharp gasps, but he didn't stop. He had already come too far to give up now. Cal looked up at him. "You're hurt. Let me carry something." Thomas gave him a tired smile. "You're already carrying more than most adults ever will." Cal didn't fully understand, but the words gave him strength. He walked faster. After hours of walking through white emptiness, they saw a shape in the distance. A building, half broken, half buried in ice. The roof was caved in, and the walls were cracked, but it still stood. They entered the old outpost. Inside, it was dark and dusty. Broken chairs, old machines, and torn wires lay everywhere. But one room had a working heater. Thomas set Cal's mother down and wrapped her in blankets. She opened her eyes and looked at him weakly. "You saved us again." Thomas shook his head. "Cal saved me too. He's the reason we're here." She smiled. "He's strong. Like you." Cal sat beside her, holding her hand. "We're together. That's all I wanted." Thomas checked the supplies. The food was low. Water was frozen. Power was fading. They had one day, maybe two, before everything stopped working. That night, snow fell harder than before. The heater blinked, then flickered out. Cold returned like a shadow. Cal curled up beside his mother, and Thomas leaned against the wall, holding a weak flashlight. "Do you miss your son?" Cal asked softly. Thomas nodded. "Every day." "What happened?" Thomas stared at the floor. "I was on a mission. I was late coming home. There was a fire, and I wasn't there in time." Cal stayed quiet for a while. Then he whispered, "You saved me. Maybe your son is proud of you now." Thomas didn't speak, but his eyes filled with tears. The next morning, the heater was dead. They had to move again. Thomas looked at Cal. "We'll take her to the valley. There's a chance someone will hear us there." He wrapped Cal's mother in every warm cloth they had, then carried her once again. Cal walked close, holding her hand the whole way. The journey was slow and painful. The wind cut their skin. Snow piled high. Thomas stumbled once, almost dropping her, but Cal caught her arm just in time. "Don't stop," Cal said. "We're close." They walked all day. They passed frozen rivers, empty cliffs, and bones of long-dead ships. The world was silent, but Cal didn't give up. Not now. Finally, they reached the edge of the valley. A tall signal tower stood in the middle, half broken, half standing. Thomas placed Cal's mother down and powered the tower with the last of his tools. The signal blinked. A weak but steady pulse. Thomas sent out a message. One word: help. They waited. Hours passed. The sun began to set. Cal's mother stopped breathing for a second. Cal screamed. But then, light in the sky, far away, a human rescue ship appeared. It was real. It was coming. Cal held his mother's hand. "We made it. We really made it." Thomas fell to his knees, exhausted. The signal had worked. And this time, someone answered. Asterisk the goodbye and the promise the rescue ship landed with a low hum, blowing snow in all directions. Its lights cut through the cold fog. Thomas stood up slowly, holding Cal's mother in his arms. Cal stayed close, never letting go of her hand. They had made it. But the fight had left them all weak and worn. The door of the ship opened, and warm air flowed out. Medics in white suits rushed down the ramp. They spoke fast, placing masks on Cal's mother, checking her pulse, and lifting her onto a stretcher. One of the medics looked at Thomas. You saved her life. Thomas shook his head. The boy did. Cal climbed into the ship beside his mother. He looked back at Thomas, panic in his eyes. You're coming too, right? Thomas paused. You're safe now. You don't need me anymore. Yes, I do, Cal said. His voice shook. You promised we'd stay together. Thomas stepped closer and put a hand on Cal's shoulder. You've been braver than most people I've ever known. But now it's time to rest. You have your mother back. She needs you. Cal looked at his mother. Her eyes were open again, her hands slowly reaching out for him. She was alive, safe. Because of everything Thomas had done, the medics pulled Cal inside and closed the ship's doors. Thomas stepped back as the ship lifted into the sky. Cal pressed his hand against the glass, watching the man who had saved him grow smaller and smaller until he was just a shadow in the snow. The ship flew away, and Thomas stood alone, but he wasn't sad. Not really, he had done what he came to do. 2 days later, Cal sat by his mother's bedside in a warm recovery center. The air was clean. The lights were soft. She was healing now. She could speak again, walk again, smile again. But every time Cal looked out the window, he thought of the man in the snow. He's still out there, Cal said. His mother nodded. He will be. That's who he is. Do you think he'll ever visit us? She smiled. He made a promise. One day, you'll find him again. And Cal believed her. Years passed. Cal grew stronger, taller, and smarter. He learned about ships and planets. He trained in search and rescue. And in his heart, he carried the memory of the fire, the snow, and the man who gave him hope when the galaxy had none. He became known across the stars, not just as a survivor, but as someone who never left anyone behind. Then one day, on a quiet moon, Cal stood outside a small camp, watching the stars above. A voice behind him said, You found me. Cal turned, and there he was, older now, with gray in his beard and scars on his hands. But it was him. Thomas. Cal ran forward and hugged him. You kept your promise, Cal said. Thomas smiled. And you kept living. Together, they sat by a fire under the stars, sharing stories, sharing silence. And as the night grew darker, the galaxy felt a little warmer, because in a cold and dangerous universe, one human had once reached out his hand and changed everything.